I have a very much of a keen interest in the psychosocial aspect of it in order to change the physical side. So in the last probably 11 years, I started a practice at Springfield, and we've grown to 21 rooms now. And what we're hoping to do is really take on medical students and really show them that health is very very biopsychosocial. And in the last 3 years, I got together with my brother, who's actually back there. He's a dentist, actually, he's not a medico. But my wife is a pharmacist, and his wife is an OT. And we just got together after a wedding event, and I think after a few beers, and then we decided, hey, let's start a closed Facebook group to see if we can help health professionals. And I think if we can help one health professional, we can help many. So this year, Tom and I came up with another crazy idea and said, hey, this year, every week, we're going to one workplace and spread the ideas of health and well-being. So that's why we're actually here tonight. So I think I better hasten up, otherwise we're going to run out of time. So with Teresa's brief, I had to change my title to How to Thrive in Medicine and How to Live a Long, Happy Life and How to Succeed in Life in 10 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to start with goals, and I love this concept between SMART goals and dumb goals. And what are SMART goals? SMART goals are very specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're realistic, and they're timely. But what I love most is actually dumb goals. So dumb goals are dreamy, they're usually unrealistic, but remember, what can be unrealistic now can be actually realistic in about 10 minutes. Okay, so but they're usually a bit more exciting, they're motivating and they're bold, whereas SMART goals are very realistic, but they're not that exciting. So hopefully in the next 6 minutes or so, I'm hoping to achieve this dumb goal of helping you to live a long and happy life. Okay, so what are we, how are we going to achieve that? And I think we need to achieve that through leveraging. And the best way to explain this is through metaphor of golf. If you play golf and you hit a ball and you're 100 meters away from the target, you don't run out there and try to fix the problem at 100 meters out there. What you do is you get back to the core of it and make a 1 millimeter shift in the right direction. And I think a lot of the problems I see in health is that we're trying to fix that problem out there rather than back here. So how do I translate that to health? If you think about on the left-hand side there, that's a physical health issue. In actual fact, if you look at this diagram, left is bio, middle is psycho, or psychology, and on the right side it's social, so biopsychosocial. So if you think about on the left side, physical health are like, say for example, COPD, heart disease, maybe diabetes, maybe metabolic syndrome. And if you dig a little bit deeper from those medical conditions, what you'll see is there's genetic factors plus lifestyle issues. So lifestyle issues are things like comfort smoking, comfort eating, comfort drugs, comfort TV, comfort Facebook. I'm very much responsible for some of those things. And the thing is that I think we all do those things, but you'll find that if we do more of those and more excessively, you'll find that underneath that is usually stress or boredom or lack of meaning or lack of purpose. And if you dig a little bit deeper from that, usually it's problems at home or at work. And at the core of it is actually usually relationships. You know, if a patient comes to see me and they say I've got problems with work, it's usually a relational problem with their employer, a relational problem with their patients, or relational problems with their colleagues. If they say I've got problems at home, so usually it's my partner, my wife, my kids, or my friends, or my neighbours. So what I'm hoping to highlight today is that at the core of it is actually relationships. So what's the evidence behind this? I think if you look up the Grant study or Glueck study, it's an interesting study where it's a longitudinal study where they actually took 800 men back in 1938, and interestingly John F. Kennedy was actually one study subject. And now they've actually included women or the children of these families. And what they're interested in was who have a long and happy life. That was their outcome. And every year, every 2 years or so, they look at the person's biopsychosocial health. So their physical health, their emotional health, as well as their relational health. And what they came up with was the best indicator, or the best determinant for a long, happy life is actually strong, stable relationships. So over the next 5 minutes, I'm hoping to give you Relationships 101 in 5 minutes. All right, so I often divide this into 3 domains. Okay, so the first one is a very simple idea, really. If you have a group of people here, and we're all very diverse, we're all very different, but we have the same goal, we'll make a great team. You can't have a soccer team with 6 super duper goalies. You're not going to succeed. So that is a really important thing. And I think when people have conflict, I think the first thing that people tend to notice is each other's differences. And that may not be the problem at all. The problem is you may not have the same goal. So when you have conflict, one of the first questions you should ask is, I'm curious, what are your goals? And see if you can align them. And that may solve your problem. The second domain, or the second issue that I want to sort of highlight, is to connect when we're disconnected. So if we think in relationships, if you feel as if if the other person don't care about you, or disconnecting from you, or don't like you, the rational thing to do is to reconnect. But most of us don't do that. When we feel as if the other person don't care about us, we tend to go into fight or flight mode, and we either lash out or we withdraw. Okay, which then makes it worse. And we see this all the times in general practice. So I want to highlight to you, how do we actually reconnect? Okay, now I call this the currencies of connection, but any of you there may sort of read a book called The 5 Love Languages. There's a gentleman in the States that's written this book. But from a CBT point of view, this really just reflects our core values and beliefs. So any of you here have partners or in a relationship, you don't have to put your hands up, but if you just reflect on that. And when you'll probably realize that when you first went out with each other, you tend to do all these 5 things. You say nice things to each other, you spend time with each other, you help each other out, you buy each other's gifts, and you hold hands, okay? And then as relationships mature, you have kids, you have financial difficulties, you're stressed out, you find that you're doing much less of this, and then you're going to be disconnected. Particularly if you're a time person and you have children. So then it's going to be a very vulnerable position. So the key thing I want to highlight here is that each one of these are different ways for us to express care and love and connection. And the problem here is that most of us are all of them, but we actually have a bias towards 1 or 2 of them. So say for example, if I'm going to use a very stereotype here, that could be vice versa. Imagine if husband or partner is a service person and work really hard, 7 days a week. And then the partner or wife is a time person. You're going to have that disconnection because she may view that as, you love your work more than me. Whereas the service person will say, what are you talking about? I'm actually doing this for you. Or the common things that we find when we do parenting is that when we see the child, teenager for example, they come in and they say, my parents don't love me. And the child is more words orientated and both parents are service orientated. So then you're actually not speaking the same emotional language. So I think the key message from here is just to understand that underlying connection is a language, is a belief. And each one of us have something different. And so there's 2 things here. 1 is to understand and accept that. Or 2 is to understand what the other person is and actually give them what they need. So if a child is words, you give them words. If the child's time, you give them time. If your husband is service, maybe service or maybe time. And the other thing which is just as important is that for you to understand what is that you need. If you're a words person and you start at the hospital and you know that your consultant is a service person, you might like to give them a hint. Or just maybe accept it and say, hey, we're talking in different languages here. Okay, so that in itself can be very, very useful. So how do you actually work it out? I might just give you a tip. One way is to get them to do a questionnaire, but that would be really weird. Or 2 is just look at their reaction. So if you give them a gift and they say, what are you doing? Why did you do that for? Then you know that may not be a gift person. But if you spend time with them and they love it, that means at that time. But if you say, hey, come out and have coffee, and they say, what for? Then you know that they may be very service orientated. All right, so that is the key message there. Very simple, but yet very, very powerful. Okay, the last tool, the last domain is how to resolve your conflict, which is really, really difficult. Most of us resolve our conflict by lashing out or withdraw, which doesn't really work. So, Gottman's research. Gottman's research is very interesting. He's a professor of psychology and he studied couples, but I think there is some key learning points that we can translate to other relationships. So what he did was he looked at couples and he followed them up for about 10 or 20 years, and a longitudinal study. And what he was really interested in was what was the difference between his two groups. He called his two groups the masters versus the disasters. And he was interested in what was the difference between the behaviour of these two groups. And in the disaster group, they did 4 things that was very prevalent. 1, they were very critical of each other. 2, they were very defensive. 3, they were contemptuous, which means I'm right, you're wrong, I'm good, and you are bad. And 4, stonewalling, which means no, don't want to talk about it anymore. Now, when you think about it, this is just a simple fight or flight response, and we all do that. The question is, what did the masters do? And that's probably more interesting. The masters were very good at giving words of acknowledgement. So they would say things like, I can see that you're very upset with me, and can you tell me more so that I can understand? So they were very, very good at acknowledging. They weren't avoiding, they weren't getting aggressive, they were being very assertive. So I want to represent that in a little graph here. It's called my little toolbox. And if you need to remember one thing, it's probably this one for tonight. So if you think about a problem or let's say conflict, then you have 4 tools to use. And what I want to highlight here is tools are all important, but they have to use in the right situation. Like I say, a hammer is very useful, but not good for combing your hair or brushing your teeth. So the first tool is, I'll probably call this the x-axis over here. The first tool is avoidance. Now avoidance is very useful if, say for example, you see a snake or there's a bushfire, okay? But in conflict, it may be useful short term, but not usually great long term. So that's number 1. Number 2 is to fight, or to get aggressive, or to blame, or to get angry. And we all do this. But generally it's good for probably the gladiator ring. Or sometimes if you're in a dangerous situation, you need to get out for safety. But generally in a collaborative relationship, generally the x-axis is not that useful. Usually useful in a jungle and in a dangerous situation. So I would call that the x-axis. Now, if you're on the x-axis, that's actually very normal. In actual fact, every day I find myself on the x-axis. The key is to recognize that, to say, I'm on the x-axis at the moment. And to detach from that, or sometimes we call it distancing from that, or in ACT therapy we call this defusing from that. Think of it like a clutch. You press on the clutch and then you switch to the y-axis. And the y-axis is about accepting, acknowledging. So imagine if you have a patient who's upset with you, to acknowledge that, say, hey, I can see that you're upset with me. And can you tell me more so that I can understand? Or I can see that you have a different point of view to me, and at the same time these are my point of views, and how can we move forward with that? So that is the y-axis. Now trust me, every time we're stressed or our needs are not being met, we are going to be on the x-axis. And if you have 2 people on the x-axis, you're going to have a war. So the key is to recognize that. I think that's a key skill, is that if you're on the x-axis, it's okay, it's normal. And just to press on the clutch, diffuse from that, or sometimes call unhooking from that, and switch to the y-axis. And as you can practice more and more, it will get easier. Okay, so that's my 30-day challenge for you guys. Is first of all, look after your relationship. It's not easy. Relationships are difficult. But yet we're not taught that at school, or we're not taught that by our parents sometimes. And so I think it's really, really important that you pay attention to that. Now in general practice, there's an item number for family therapy. There's an item number for couple counselling. There's an item number for parenting work. But most GPs probably are not aware of it. But what I want to highlight here to you is, as family doctors, it is within our scope of practice. I think that's probably the key point I want to make. 3, practice when you are have a conflict to align your goals. And sometimes you can't. That's reality of it. Sometimes we just have 2 different goals, and it's okay. It's to say, hey, I think we have 2 different goals. Let's part, and that's okay. No hard feelings. Number 3 is to connect with the right currency. I think that's important. But if you don't know, just do all those 5 things. Okay, just like in multi-choice, just follow all of them and you get it right. But it's not very efficient. It's not very efficient. And number 4, the last thing is, remember that little toolbox for me, is when you are upset or when you're in conflict or you have a problem and you go on the x-axis, the key thing is to recognize it and say, I'm on the x-axis, and switch to the y. And you can actually do that 6 months later. And so this is a repair process. And you can go up to your partner or your boss or your colleagues and say, hey John, 6 months ago, I was on the x-axis. Apologies. And I want to acknowledge that. I really care about you. And so do you think we can move forward with that? So that's probably the key message today. Any future help? I've actually written a little blog called Eastside Connect. You can contact me through there if you need help. We started a little group, as I say, with Tom, my wife and my sister-in-laws, a closed Facebook called Health Pro Exchange, and that's a really dumb goal that we have. The dumb goal is to collaborate all health professionals. That's going to be really difficult because we're all very, very diverse. But nevertheless, a dumb goal is worthwhile. Okay, thank you very much.